Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something unusual. Imagine opening your eyes and finding yourself not in your own bed, not tangled in your familiar blanket, but beneath heavy velvet curtains, in sheets softer than clouds and smelling faintly of rosewater. The ceiling above isn't popcorn plaster or a faint water stain from last winter's rain, but painted frescoes of angels and vines swirling endlessly. And just when you think maybe you're still half dreaming, you glance to the side and there's a mirror. A tall, gilded thing that gleams in candlelight, and staring back at you is not your usual, maybe slightly rumpled morning self, but a face framed in gold braids, eyes wide, a little shocked, a little regal. Tonight, you're not just you, you're a princess. Probably not going to survive this, but hey, at least the dress looks good. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are, because somewhere in the world, there's another listener sinking into this exact same fairy tale right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bed is vast, so wide you could lose yourself in it like a small raft on a lake. The sheets are cool silk, stitched with patterns of lilies, and every pillow smells faintly of lavender, as if the servants secretly toss them into sachets each morning. When you swing your legs off the bed, the floor isn't the creaky wood you know. It's polished marble, veined with gold. Cold, a shock against bare toes that makes you hop like you've stepped on ice. Not very princess-like, but hey, you're still new at this. Across the chamber, the mirror gleams. It's the kind of mirror that legends say can show your true self, your fate, or occasionally just that your hair looks ridiculous. The frame is carved with twisting ivy and tiny cherubs who all seem to be rolling their eyes, like even they know this is going to be complicated. You step closer, cautiously, because the figure in the glass is undeniably you, yet not. The cheeks are smooth, the lips painted faintly with rose, and the gown you wear, wait, when did you change into that? Is a cascade of pale blue satin sprinkled with what looks like actual pearls, not glued-on craft store pearls, the real ones, the kind sailors once risked their lives diving for. Your hands lift almost on their own, fingertips brushing the bodice, and for a moment you're caught between awe and absurdity. You, who usually debate whether sweatpants are outside appropriate, are apparently royalty. It's tempting to think this is some medieval version of cosplay, but the weight on your head says otherwise. A crown, not enormous and spiky, but a delicate circlet of gold presses lightly against your temples. It doesn't feel like cardboard from a party store. It feels like history itself is balanced there. And maybe a bit of a headache too. Somewhere in the hall beyond, you hear footsteps, soft, quick, deliberate. Servants maybe, guards, or if this were a Grimm's tale, possibly a witch disguised as a housemaid. Hard to tell. You draw closer to the mirror, studying the princess's face. She blinks when you blink, tilts her head when you tilt yours, but the longer you stare, the less certain you are that she's following your lead. Maybe she's watching you, like some ancient soul stuck behind glass, lending you her body for a day. Folklorists can't agree on whether mirrors in fairy tales were portals, prisons, or just convenient metaphors for vanity. One scholar swears they're remnants of old Norse scrying pools. Another insists it's just the Brothers Grimm being dramatic. Either way, the sense that someone or something is waiting in that reflection makes your spine shiver. You reach up and tug gently at a braid, half expecting the reflection to delay by a beat. It doesn't, but you notice something else. Etched faintly at the mirror's bottom corner, almost hidden beneath the gilt curls of decoration, are words. You lean close, squinting. Not in English, not in French either. Some twisting old script, maybe Latin. Or maybe just the furniture maker's version of Made in Bavaria. The air in the chamber shifts. You notice it then. The stillness. Not silence. More like the castle itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to play your part. From outside the window, faint morning bells toll. Not phone alarms, not car horns. Church bells, deep and resonant, calling the kingdom awake. You laugh softly to yourself because, of course, the bells are tolling. That's what happens in every Disney prologue. A kingdom awakes, birds sing, and a princess yawns gracefully while plotting how to survive until breakfast. Only when you open your mouth, no song emerges, just a dry throat that says, "I could kill for coffee." A quick aside, historians point out that medieval princesses never drank coffee. Europe didn't even get the beans until the 1600s. But there are rumors that noble households experimented with herbal brews that made you jittery enough to recite poetry at double speed. So, who knows? Maybe there's a proto-latte waiting downstairs. The door creaks open before you can find out. A girl, no, not a girl, a lady-in-waiting slips inside. She bows deeply, the kind of bow that makes you want to look over your shoulder. Sure, she must be aiming it at someone more deserving. "Your Highness," she whispers, voice trembling, as though you're both terrifying and fragile. The day begins. And with that, you realize something unsettling. Being a princess is not just gowns and crowns. It's expectation. It's 1,000 eyes watching. It's history pressing on your shoulders. But for now, you smile, pretending you've done this 100 mornings before. Because if fairy tales have taught you anything, confidence, real or faked, goes a long way. The lady-in-waiting hovers like a hummingbird, arms full of fabrics that gleam faintly in the candlelight. She doesn't ask you what you'd like to wear. She announces it. "The gown has chosen you, Highness." You raise an eyebrow. "Excuse me, the what has done the what now?" But before you can crack a joke about clothes shopping at Hogwarts, she whisks open a wardrobe the size of a small apartment. Inside, it's not just a closet. It's a cathedral of color. Rows of gowns ripple as if caught in a hidden breeze, shimmering between silks, velvets, and brocades. The embroidery glimmers with threads of gold, pearls, and, no exaggeration, tiny gemstones. Imagine your usual closet sighing in resignation right now. You step forward, hesitant, but the strangest thing happens. The gowns move. Not dramatically, no Beauty and the Beast waltzing wardrobes here, but just enough to suggest intention. One sleeve twitches, a hem sways, then a particular dress, pale green with ivy stitched along its edges, leans forward as though bowing. Its fabric brushes against your arm like an overeager puppy nudging for attention. "Ah, there it is," your lady-in-waiting breathes, as if the gown just cast its vote in an election. It knows you. And you're standing there, trying not to laugh. Because sure, it's magical, but it's also a little clingy. Like, calm down, dress. You've just met. Still, when you touch it, a shiver runs up your fingers. The fabric is cool, heavier than you'd expect, and it carries a faint perfume of crushed mint. You're half convinced the ivy embroidery is actually alive, tiny green shoots curling tighter around the bodice when you hesitate. The dress wants you, no doubt about it. Historically speaking, gowns were less magical and more suffocating. Literally. In the Renaissance, noble women wore bodices stiffened with whalebone so rigid you couldn't bend, sneeze, or sometimes breathe without risk of fainting. One 16th century court lady supposedly collapsed mid-banquet, and the debate still rages on. Was it from too much wine, or the fact that her lungs had about 2 cubic centimeters of wiggle room? Folklorists, of course, say magical dresses are simply echoes of those historical constraints, where clothes didn't just adorn you, they controlled you. With the lady's help, you step into the green gown. It slides up your body with a whisper, almost too smooth, too eager. The ivy embroidery tightens like a hug, affectionate, yet possessive. When the last clasp seals itself shut with a faint click, you feel taller, straighter, like you've been rewired into princess posture. You catch yourself in the mirror, and whoa, It's dramatic. Not prom night dramatic, more like painted on a cathedral ceiling dramatic. For a heartbeat, you almost believe you were always meant to wear this. The lady in waiting beams. Perfect. The court will be most pleased. Court. Right. Because today, apparently, you're scheduled for an audience. No pressure. Just hundreds of people trained since birth to spot any slip of etiquette you're bound to make in the first 5 minutes. Fantastic. Still, you've got to admit, it's not all bad. The gown doesn't just look regal, it feels alive, like it's lending you confidence, whispering, stand tall, don't trip, pretend you know which fork is which. Kind of like that one friend who hypes you up for a big date, only silkier. You test a few steps. The gown swishes elegantly no matter how clumsy you try to be, which is great because your natural gait is more tripping over curbs than graceful swan gliding on water. Maybe this enchanted fabric really does smooth out human flaws. If only it could also pay taxes. You think back to the mirror, to that princess's face staring at you with such unnerving calm. Maybe the dress doesn't just choose the wearer, it molds them. Which sparks a darker thought. What if every princess before you was simply absorbed, reshaped by silk and ivy until they forgot who they were? Folklorists can't agree on whether magical clothing in tales is a blessing or a curse. Some see it as empowerment, a Cinderella moment, where a gown gives you access to a new world. Others argue it's a trap, where fabric becomes fate and individuality dissolves into expectation. For now, though, you smooth the skirts, breathe as best you can, and allow yourself a small grin. Because admit it, part of you is thrilled. Then the lady in waiting claps her hands, the doors creak open, and a pair of swans, actual swans, tall and white with black-tipped beaks, stride in like they own the place. Each wears a tiny silver collar. One bows low, wings spread in greeting. Breakfast is served. Oh, you're dining with swans, naturally. The swans waddle forward with a confidence that suggests they've done this before. Their feathers catch the morning light spilling through tall arched windows, each plume so perfectly white it makes you suddenly aware of your own messy pillow hair, which, thankfully, the gown is covering for now. One swan ruffles its wings dramatically, as if saying, "We are here, and you may applaud now." Your lady-in-waiting gestures toward a long table set beneath a tapestry of knights jousting in slow-motion embroidery. The table itself groans beneath the weight of breakfast. Silver platters hold pyramids of fruit, grapes so fat they look like they've been airbrushed, figs bursting with honey, pears polished to a glossy sheen. There's fresh bread, too, warm enough that steam curls from the crust. And because this is apparently an alternate reality where carbs don't count, there are at least 6 different kinds of cheese. You move to sit at the head of the table, but one of the swans hops gracefully into the chair opposite you. The other perches beside it, folding its wings neatly. Both stare at you with round, unblinking eyes, as if waiting for you to begin the conversation. "So," you say, awkwardly reaching for a grape, "do we talk, or are you more of the silently judgmental type?" The larger swan coughs. Not a honk, not a hiss, a cough. Then, in the clipped nasal tones of a palace bureaucrat, it says, "We talk." You nearly drop your grape. "Of course you do." The second swan clears its throat and adds, "We also critique. It is our royal duty." Fantastic. Breakfast with feathered food critics. They begin pecking delicately at bowls of oats and seeds that a servant has placed before them. Meanwhile, you reach for bread, tearing it apart and dipping it in honey. One swan tilts its head. "Messy," it remarks. "Authentic. It's called rustic charm." The other swan nods, as if conceding the point. Acceptable. For now. Folklore fact time. Talking birds aren't unusual in fairy tales. Parrots, crows, nightingales all pop up in stories across cultures. In Norse sagas, Odin had ravens that whispered secrets of the world. In Russian folklore, firebirds spoke in riddles. But swans? That's rarer. Most swan tales focus on transformations, maidens pursed into feathered forms, brothers trapped by wicked spells. Scholars debate whether swans symbolize purity, entrapment, or just the medieval fascination with birds that could both swim and fly. A few even argue that talking swans are remnants of lost myths about divine messengers. Which means, at this table, you're either dining with cursed nobles or undercover gods. No pressure. The conversation drifts as you nibble cheese and fruit. The swans gossip like seasoned courtiers, dropping names you don't recognize but with tones that make it very clear who's considered scandalous. "Did you hear," one whispers, though swan whispers are more like sharp hisses, "that the Duke of Hammersfield danced with his cousin at the last festival?" The other swan gasps, "Outrageous!" though to be fair, at least it wasn't his horse this time. You choke on a fig. "Wait, his what?" Both swans stare at you with that blank bird expression, as if to say, "We said nothing. Move along." You try to steer the conversation towards safer ground. "So, what exactly am I supposed to be doing today? Princess schedule and all that." One swan flaps its wings, scattering a few crumbs. Lessons in glace, curtsies, speech, composure, the usual. The other adds, followed by garden promenade, court audience, and possibly a ball, depending on whether the astrologers approve the alignment of the stars. Great. Stars deciding my calendar. Totally normal. They both nod solemnly. Royal life is rarely practical. The meal winds down. You're pleasantly full, but also starting to suspect that cheese and honey before a day of curtsying might be a strategic mistake. Still, you rise, brushing crumbs from your gown. The swans hop down from their chairs and bow deeply, wings sweeping the floor. "May your day be dignified," one intones. "And free of tripping," the other adds helpfully. You sigh, already certain those are famous last words. The lady-in-waiting appears at your side once more, expression calm, hands folded. The steward awaits to begin your lessons, Highness. Ah, yes, time to learn how to be graceful, because, obviously, walking in a dress that thinks it owns you isn't difficult enough. The steward is waiting in a long corridor lined with portraits of ancestors you definitely don't recognize. Every face stares down with the same expression, solemn, regal, and just a little constipated. They've clearly been practicing their serious nobility look for centuries. The steward himself is tall, bony, and so precise in his movements you suspect he practices breathing on a schedule. He wears a doublet so stiff it might double as armor, and his mustache has been waxed into sharp little hooks that could take out an unsuspecting fly. "Your Highness," he says, bowing with all the grace of a folding chair. "Today we begin with the fundamentals of comportment." "Comportment," you echo, trying not to smirk. "Is that like posture for royalty?" His eyes twitch. "It is the art of embodying dignity, of moving as though every motion were carved in marble." "Sounds exhausting," you mutter. He claps his hands, and suddenly 3 other servants appear, each carrying what looks like a different torture device. One holds a long wooden rod, another a stack of books, the third a bowl of water. Your instincts scream, run. Lesson 1. Balance. The steward places the rod across your shoulders and instructs you to keep it level while walking. Simple enough, until you realize the gown has its own opinions about movement. The ivy embroidery seems determined to steer you toward a permanent, slow glide, as if auditioning you for Swan Lake. You wobble. The steward tuts. "Grace, Highness. Pretend you are drifting on a cloud." You attempt to drift. Instead, you lurch forward like a cloud in a windstorm.
The steward sighs so hard his mustache quivers. Lesson 2. Poise. The books are stacked carefully on your head, not slim paperbacks. We're talking illuminated manuscripts, heavy, leather-bound, gold-leaf monsters. Balancing them is like trying to walk with a sleeping cat perched on your skull. Keep the chin high, the steward orders. You obey. Unfortunately, keeping your chin high makes it impossible to see where your feet are going. One misstep, and half the stack topples to the marble floor with a crash loud enough to wake the ancestors in their portraits. From the corner, one of the swans pokes its head in through the doorway, hoax once, and leaves. You can almost hear it laughing. Lesson 3. Elegance. This is where the bowl of water comes in. The steward instructs you to dip your fingers delicately and lift them out without spilling a drop. Sounds simple, until he adds, now do it while walking and smiling. You manage 3 steps before water sloshes down the front of your gown. The ivy embroidery shivers in protest, like it knows you've just ruined its favorite perfume. Smile, the steward commands through gritted teeth. You flash your brightest grin. Is this dignified enough? He pinches the bridge of his nose. Historical tidbit. Grace lessons weren't far from this absurd. In European courts, young noble women were drilled endlessly on posture, curtsy depth, fan etiquette, and even how to faint prettily without smacking their heads on furniture. Folklorists argue that fairy tales' obsession with princesses moving effortlessly is a leftover from these training rituals. Of course, nobody mentions the bruises, stubbed toes, or the occasional book-related concussion. The session drags on, your muscles aching, your patience thinner than parchment. But slowly, painfully, you start to get it. The gown helps. It seems to catch you when you stumble, nudging you back into alignment. Your body, too, begins to adapt. After an hour, your steps are smoother. After 2, you can turn without spilling the water. By the 3rd hour, you manage a curtsy that even the steward admits is adequate, which, coming from him, is basically a standing ovation. Tomorrow, he says, finally dismissing you, we refine your wave. Terrifying, you reply. He bows stiffly, retreating down the corridor like a clockwork toy winding itself away. You're left standing in silence, skirts heavy, shoulders sore, but oddly proud. Because for the first time today, you feel less like a fraud wearing someone else's crown, and more like someone who might, just maybe, pull this princess thing off. Until your stomach growls, loudly. Turns out, grace is easier on a full stomach of bread and cheese.
The palace gardens stretch out like a dream painted onto reality. Wide paths of crushed white stone wind through hedges trimmed into impossible shapes. Dragons, crowns, and one that suspiciously resembles a very smug goose. Fountains sparkle in the late morning sun, their water catching the light in arcs that look almost like crystal threads. Your lady-in-waiting guides you to the heart of it all, a rose maze, tall walls of greenery blooming with red, pink, and ivory blossoms. The air is thick with perfume, so sweet it feels like you're walking through syrup. You half expect to find a Disney bluebird waiting with a fresh latte. Instead, you find whispers. At first, you think it's just the wind rustling the leaves, but when you pause, the sound sharpens into words. Soft, hushed, layered voices curling up from the petals themselves. Each flower seems to be speaking, not in unison, but in overlapping fragments. Secrets, regrets, lullabies half remembered. You lean closer to one pale rose and it murmurs, "She wept here on the morning of her wedding." Another, crimson and velvety, sighs, "He promised her the crown, but gave her exile." Okay, that's unsettling. You pull back, nearly tripping on your down. According to folklore, whispering plants aren't new.
Celtic legends tell of hazel trees that spoke prophecies to those who dared to listen. In Slavic tales, ferns bloomed only once a year and whispered where treasures were buried. Historians, of course, claim it's all poetic imagination, peasants hearing the wind and turning it into superstition, but others suggest gardens in royal courts were deliberately planted with symbolic flowers, each carrying coded meanings: roses for secrecy, lilies for mourning, violets for loyalty. Maybe the whispers you hear are simply those meanings amplified. You wander deeper, the whispers following. Some are sad, others playful like gossip drifting from unseen courtiers. She tripped during the procession. Oh, the shame! Another hisses, beware the one who smiles too sweetly. One particularly thorny bush snickers, watch your hem, princess, blood stains easily. You step back quickly. That one sounded a little too personal. Your lady-in-waiting pretends not to notice the voices at all. Either she can't hear them, or palace protocol dictates never acknowledge the talking flora. At the center of the maze lies a marble bench beside a fountain shaped like a nymph, pouring endless water from an urn. You sit, grateful for the chance to rest your aching feet. The gown sighs contentedly, settling around you like it's pleased you finally sat somewhere aesthetically appropriate. The roses nearby lower their voices, as if conspiring. You catch snatches of phrases. She doesn't know yet. The crown isn't hers, but she wears it well. Your heart thuds. Are the flowers whispering about you, or about the princess whose reflection you borrowed? A small laugh escapes you, shaky but genuine. First swans that gossip, now flowers that snitch. What's next? Bread rolls that file complaints? One rose, pale yellow, actually answers, not bread rolls, pastries. You blink. Great, even croissants have opinions. Scholars still argue whether whispering gardens in fairy tales represent knowledge or madness. Are the voices truth-tellers, warning the heroine? Or are they manifestations of her own doubts echoing through leaves? No one agrees. What you do know is that each word makes you more aware of the crown on your head, its weight pressing harder with every secret spilled. The lady-in-waiting finally clears her throat gently. Highness, the villagers await. It is time for your promenade beyond the palace walls. You rise, casting one last glance at the roses. They've gone silent, as if closing their lips the moment you turn away. Still, you swear you hear a faint whisper trailing after you. Remember us when the choice comes. Chills run down your spine.
The palace gates creak open, and suddenly the world changes. Gone are the marble floors and whispering gardens. Here, cobblestones stretch under your borrowed slippers, uneven and cracked, carrying the smell of bread baking, smoke curling from chimneys, and animals that clearly don't believe in plumbing. Villagers bustle about with baskets, sacks, and tools slung over their shoulders. They don't bow immediately. Instead, they pause mid-step, eyes catching on your gown, your crown, your too careful posture. Then recognition blooms across their faces, like the whole town just realized the celebrity cameo of the century is happening in their marketplace. The murmurs start small. It's her. The princess. Look at the pearls. And then, like a wave at a baseball game, the bows begin. Awkward, uneven, heartfelt. Children tug at their mother's skirts, craning their necks to stare at you with open-mouthed wonder. You raise a hand in what you hope is a royal wave. It feels more like unsure tourist pointing at a menu, but the crowd seems satisfied. A baker even wipes flour from his hands and presses a hot roll into yours, free of charge. Finally, carbs that don't judge you. The disguise part comes later. Your lady-in-waiting insists you try blending in, which apparently means swapping the jewel-dripping gown for a plain wool dress and tucking the crown into a basket. The enchanted gown seems offended, but reluctantly releases you, folding itself neatly in the arms of a servant, as though sulking. Now, in rough fabric that itches faintly at your collar, you're anonymous, or at least you should be. Problem is, royalty leaks out. It's in the way you walk, the way people instinctively part around you, the way your voice carries when you ask the price of apples. One old woman squints at you, grins toothlessly, and says, "You've got queen's eyes, child. No hiding that." You chuckle nervously and mutter, "Must be the onions." History break. Royal visits to villages were rare but powerful. When a queen or princess appeared in plain garb, it often wasn't to mingle. It was to test loyalty, gather gossip, or simply remind people who held power. Folklorists argue that tales of disguised royalty blur the line between ruler and ruled, suggesting everyone secretly dreams of being recognized for their true worth. Others say it's just a handy way for writers to slip nobles into tavern shenanigans. As you wander, you're struck by the contrast. In the palace, you are wrapped in silence, weighed down by protocol. Here, it's noisy, chaotic, alive. Chickens dart between legs, merchants shout prices over each other, a fiddler plays off-key, children clapping along anyway. And yet, people still look at you differently. Even in wool, even with your hair tucked away, there's a strange recognition. One little girl hands you a daisy and whispers, "Princess." You freeze. What makes you think that? The child shrugs. You smile like stories. Well, that's a line you'll never forget. The longer you stay, the more comfortable you feel. You taste honey straight from a comb, sticky and golden. You laugh when a goat tries to chew the hem of your borrowed dress. You trade jokes with a blacksmith about how his hammer looks suspiciously like your alarm clock back home. For the first time since waking in silk sheets, you don't feel like an imposter. You feel human, accessible, almost free. But as you savor it, there's a tug in your chest, because deep down, you know this is temporary. The gown is waiting, the crown is waiting, and when you return through the gates, the village chatter will fade into whispers behind stone walls. Still, for now, you tuck the daisy behind your ear and let yourself belong, just for one more street, one more smile.
Night falls like velvet, drawn across the sky. The palace hums with anticipation. Servants rush in pairs, carrying trays of candied fruits and chilled wine. Musicians tune their lutes and violins until the air itself seems to shimmer with expectation. Word spreads quickly. Tonight, a ball is being held in your honor. When your gown returns from its sulking fit, it is radiant, more dazzling than before, as though it forgave you for trading it for wool earlier. Threads of silver catch the candlelight. Pearls gleam like frozen teardrops. And though the fabric feels light, the responsibility sewn into it weighs heavy on your shoulders. The ballroom is everything fairy tales promised, and then some. Chandeliers drip with crystal, scattering golden rain across polished marble. Couples whirl in practiced arcs, skirts sweeping, shoes tapping. Every bow and curtsy you receive feels rehearsed, yet there's warmth beneath the formality, like everyone secretly enjoys being part of this spectacle. When the herald announces your arrival, the music hushes. Heads turn, and for one dizzying heartbeat, you are the axis on which the entire room spins. Dancing begins. A courtier extends a hand, and suddenly you're gliding across the floor, trying not to step on anyone's toes. The steps come easier than expected, as though your body remembers choreography it never actually learned. Thank you, enchanted princess muscle memory.
Applause follows each turn. Compliments flow as freely as the wine. But underneath the glittering surface, you sense something else. Every bow feels a touch too deep. Every toast a shade too eager. Smiles bloom wide, but eyes linger calculatingly, measuring you like a chess piece. You can almost hear their thoughts. A princess ripe for alliance, a crown to claim, a throne to sway. History pulse. Medieval balls weren't just parties, they were political arenas. Behind each dance was strategy. Marriages were brokered, alliances cemented, wars delayed or declared, depending on who twirled whose daughter under candlelight. The music softened tempers, but the stakes were sharper than swords. You notice it most clearly when a duke, powdered wig bobbing like a ship at sea, leans close during a bow and murmurs, "A smile can win more battles than steel." Your smile freezes on your lips. You keep moving, dancing, twirling, but now the ball feels different. Less like celebration, more like negotiation in disguise. The chandeliers seem heavier, the laughter sharper. And yet, there are moments of genuine joy. A harpist plucks a melody that makes you forget politics for a heartbeat. A child from the noble families trips during a dance, and instead of scolding, the entire room chuckles gently, parents clapping encouragement. You catch yourself laughing too, the sound bright and unguarded. For a moment, you feel the magic of the ball as it was meant to be. An enchantment of beauty, music, and togetherness. But deep down, you know the crown on your head tonight isn't just an accessory. It's bait, a magnet, a contract unspoken. And as the music swells, you wonder, how long can you keep spinning before the dance traps you in place forever?
The chandeliers still glow, but the night stretches late. Your cheeks ache from smiling, your feet from dancing, and your heart from pretending the glitter doesn't scratch. When the last strains of music fade, the courtiers drift like moths into the darker corridors, leaving behind a ballroom littered with wilting roses, spilled wine, and gossip hanging thicker than the perfume cloud. You slip away, gown trailing like a comet's tail, and find yourself in the long gallery of portraits. Hundreds of eyes, dead queens and forgotten princesses, stare down from gilt frames. Some look kind, others stern. All of them seem to whisper the same silent message. It is never just about the dance. You slump onto a cushioned bench, tugging at the weight of pearls around your throat. Being a princess for a day is exhausting. No one mentioned the side effect of a permanent smile cramp. The steward appears from nowhere, as stewards do, holding a parchment with your schedule. Tomorrow, it seems, is packed with negotiations, lessons in etiquette, and yet another public feast. He doesn't say it out loud, but you hear the truth between lines. You are less a person, more a role. History aside, in many real courts, princesses were chess pieces. Marriages arranged across countries, futures traded like spices. Even their portraits were sent in advance, like glossy headshots in a medieval dating app. Folklorists still argue whether fairy tales softened this truth or disguised it entirely. You wander deeper into the gallery. The air grows cooler. The candlelight wavers. A draft slips through, curling your gown around your ankles like a whispery warning. And there it is, the dilemma. Behind every toast tonight was calculation. Behind every bouquet of roses, a hidden thorn. You feel it pressing if you were truly a princess. Some portraits seem to answer. One woman wears a crown so large it tilts her head unnaturally. Another clutches a book, gaze defiant, as if daring history to remember more than her dowry. A third, younger still, has eyes painted bright with hope, though her nameplate is scratched away. You shiver, because their fate is your question too. And yet, you're not entirely trapped. You're aware, in a half-dreamy way, that this is still your story, that somewhere beyond the marble halls and velvet robes, a different life waits with sneakers, coffee, and messy hair mornings. But for now, you are here, and the kingdom expects its princess to choose wisely. The question is simple and impossible at once. Do you lean into the crown or into yourself? Morning comes with a stubborn streak of gold pressing through silk curtains. Your body aches from last night's ball, though your mind still twirls, caught in the memory of chandeliers and hidden daggers in every smile. But today brings something different. Instead of courtiers and whispers, a stable boy bows low and presents a horse. A white mare with a mane like fresh spun flax stamps her hooves as if she's impatient with all the royal nonsense. For the first time, no steward hovers with a list of obligations. The reins are placed directly in your hands. You climb into the saddle. At first, the gown resists, but it quickly transforms, hem tightening, fabric reshaping itself into something practical, as though it too wants freedom. Your dress clearly has more common sense than most politicians. The gates creak open, guards bow, and suddenly, the world beyond the palace stretches wide. The road is dust and sun, the air crisp and unscented by perfume. You breathe deeper than you have since waking in this strange princess life. Birds scatter in startled arcs as the mare carries you into the rolling fields. Wheat ripples like an ocean of bronze. Trees gather in hushed clusters, their leaves whispering secrets older than the crown. For a while, you just ride. Wind tangles your hair, your cheeks sting pink. You laugh out loud, real laughter, not the painted version expected at banquets. It feels wild and right, like you've borrowed a heartbeat from freedom itself. History slip in. Many royal women rarely rode outside palace walls without a full entourage. Yet folklore is full of them stealing these moments, riding disguised as peasants, galloping across forests, or trading silk for leather. Historians debate whether these tales were hopeful inventions or fragments of truth left hidden in whispers. A brook cuts across the path. The mare drinks, and you slip down, kneeling to let the cold water splash across your palms. The reflection stares back. Not just a princess now, but something freer. The crown seems fainter, as though it remembers it wasn't always yours. When you remount, the forest rises around you. Shadows weave between branches. The hum of the court is far away now, replaced by birdsong, the crunch of hooves, the creak of saddle leather. And for a fleeting moment, you wonder, if you kept riding, if you never turned back, would anyone know the difference between a vanished princess and a dream that simply woke too soon? Your mare snorts as if in answer, and somewhere deeper in the woods, a twig snaps. You're not alone. But whether it's friend or foe, you'll soon discover. The forest folds around you like a secret you weren't meant to find. Sunlight filters in thin ribbons, painting the moss in shifting greens. Birds hush. The mare's ears twitch. You grip the reins a little tighter. Then you see him. A figure half hidden in shadows, leaning casually against an oak as though the whole forest belongs to him. Cloak dark, hood drawn low, boots muddied by travel. He looks up as if he's been expecting you, and his smile, well, it's the sort that suggests he's both harmless and the type of person your parents warned you about. Strange path for a princess, he says, voice smooth, almost amused. You bristle. And strange manners for a stranger. He laughs softly, bowing in exaggerated flourish. Touché. I forget palace folk like their bows deep and their words deeper. Your mare snorts, unimpressed. You're halfway to trusting her judgment more than your own. He steps closer, boots cracking twigs, and lowers his voice. Careful, though. Those chandeliers you twirled under, they cast shadows long enough to reach here. There are plots in your palace, plots you won't see until it's too late. The forest seems to lean in, listening. History pause. Advisors, strangers, prophets, they always creep into fairy tales. Sometimes they're wise guides, sometimes tricksters. Scholars still argue whether such figures represent outside truth or simply temptations dressed as wisdom. Either way, every princess story seems to hinge on one. You study him, trying to decide whether he's fox or shepherd. His eyes gleam with mischief, but there's a seriousness tucked beneath. The kind of seriousness people carry when they've seen too much. So why warn me, you ask? Because, he shrugs, every kingdom loves its traps, but I prefer to dance with someone who knows they're dancing. Your laugh escapes before you can stop it, sharp and nervous. You don't strike me as the waltzing type. Oh, I waltz, he says, stepping back, sweeping his cloak with theatrical flair. Badly, but I know when the music's rigged. The mare stamps, restless. The stranger tilts his head. Ride further, if you dare. The forest might show you truths no chandelier ever will. And with that, he melts into the shadows. One blink, and he's gone. You're left staring at the spot where he stood, the words echoing louder than the silence. Is he a warning? A test? Or just another dream character, mischievous enough to make your day harder? Either way, the forest no longer feels like just a ride. It feels like a crossroad.
The mare paws at the earth, restless, as though she too heard the stranger's words echoing long after his cloak vanished into the trees. You ride on, though the forest now feels alive with secrets. The air is cooler, heavier, like it knows you're about to stumble across something you shouldn't. And then you do. At the edge of a clearing, half buried under ivy and thyme, lies a stone pedestal. Upon it rests not a crown of gold and jewels, but something older. The metal is tarnished, etched with runes that shimmer faintly in the fading light. It looks less like treasure, more like a warning someone forgot to remove. You dismount. The mare snorts nervously, refusing to step closer, which, let's be honest, is rarely a good sign. On the inner band of the crown, words are carved in a language your tongue doesn't recognize, but your mind oddly does. The translation curls into your thoughts like smoke. The crown does not choose the head. The head is chosen by the crown. Well, that's unsettling. History detour. In many cultures, crowns weren't just pretty hats. They symbolized divine right, the idea that kings and queens ruled because fate, gods, or destiny itself had chosen them. Folklorists still debate whether this belief was genuine faith or very convenient political marketing. Spoiler, probably both. As you trace the inscription, the forest seems to lean closer. Images flash in your mind, faces of rulers crowned before they were ready, kingdoms breaking under the weight of gold, whispers of rebellion woven into lullabies. A crown that chooses feels less like privilege, more like possession. And then
Another thought creeps in, sharp and unwelcome. What if this crown never meant to choose you at all? The runes flicker, like candlelight caught in wind. For a moment you swear the crown hums, low and steady, a sound felt more in your bones than ears. You pull back, heart thudding. Maybe it's cursed, maybe it's enchanted, maybe you're just low on electrolytes after too much dancing. Still, the words linger, branded in your thoughts. The head is chosen by the crown. Your mare nickers urgently, tugging at the reins as though she's saying, "Enough spooky forest archaeology, time to leave." You hesitate only a moment longer before swinging back into the saddle. But as you ride, the crown's secret rides with you, heavy and unsettling, whispering that your day as a princess isn't as random or safe as it seemed. The forest thins, the path tilts back toward the palace, and you can't help but wonder, are you the dreamer here, or the one being dreamed by the crown?
Sleep does not come easily that night. Back in the palace, velvet curtains sway in a draft you can't quite place. The mattress is softer than clouds, yet it feels like lying on thorns. Every time you close your eyes, the crown's inscription flickers in the dark. The head is chosen by the crown. You toss, you turn. The pearls at your throat feel tighter. And then dreams arrive, but they don't feel like yours. You're standing in the ballroom again. The chandeliers drip wax instead of light. Courtiers bow, but their faces are blurred, mouths whispering in languages you can't understand. When you move to dance, your feet sink into the floor as though the marble has turned to quicksand. Somewhere in the shadows, that cloaked stranger watches. He doesn't move to help. He only lifts a hand, as if to remind you, you were warned. The dream shifts. You're back in the forest, the crown on its pedestal, except now, when you reach for it, the crown lunges toward you. It clamps onto your head like jaws. The runes blaze hot white. You wake with a gasp, sheets tangled around your legs, the sound of humming still vibrating in your skull. Except, this time, it isn't fading. It's real. Your chamber walls ripple faintly, as though painted scenery. Columns bend, then straighten. Windows flicker with images that don't belong. Mountains where there should be gardens. Rivers where there should be courtyards. You blink hard, rub your eyes. Nothing helps. Reality itself feels unsteady, like a stage set being wheeled around while you're still standing on it. History digression. Some scholars believe fairy tales acted as dream containers, a way for communities to hold impossible fears and hopes in a story-shaped vessel. Folklorists argue whether the blurred line between dream and reality was just a metaphor, or whether old storytellers truly thought dreams could rewrite waking life. And here you are, living their debate firsthand. When you rise from bed, the floor tilts slightly, like a ship in rough waters. Your reflection in the mirror blinks a moment too late. And when you whisper, "This isn't real," the walls seem to smirk. Night stretches on. Dawn never quite arrives. By the time light filters in, if it is light, you're not sure whether you've slept at all. The castle is solid under your feet, but in your mind you can't shake it. The crown has begun to dream, and you are its chosen stage.
The day breaks, or at least something pretending to be morning filters through your chamber window. The light feels too thin, too pale, as if painted hastily with a tired brush. You dress, though your gown seems to shift moods with you, sleeves lengthening and tightening as though fabric itself can't decide which reality to commit to. When you glance at your reflection, it ripples faintly, as if the mirror is considering showing you someone else. And then the summons arrives. A steward bows low. "Your Highness, the time has come." The words hang heavy. Time? For what? You follow, steps echoing on marble that feels softer than it should. You're led not to the ballroom or throne room, but to a hall you haven't seen before. At the far end, 2 pedestals wait. On one rests a pair of glass slippers, glittering with impossible clarity. On the other, a scuffed pair of sneakers. Your sneakers, somehow plucked from your own life and dropped into this dream. The room holds its breath. The steward speaks. "Your Highness, the kingdom asks you to choose." You step closer. The glass slippers shimmer, delicate as frost, impossibly beautiful. They promise permanence, power, the continuation of your princess life. But looking at them, you can already feel the blisters, the fragility, the weight of every step watched and judged. The sneakers are absurdly ordinary. One lace frayed, a faint coffee stain on the toe. Yet when you look at them, your chest aches with a fierce kind of homesickness. They promise no throne, no subjects, no destiny. Just your own messy, unglamorous freedom. History aside, fairy tales often circle back to choices. In many, the heroine chooses duty over self, or self over duty. Folklorists debate whether the happy ending was truly meant to be the crown, or whether survival itself was the gift. Your hand hovers between them. The slippers seem to whisper, "Rule, belong, shine forever." The sneakers mutter back, "Run, laugh, be no one's chess piece." It isn't an easy choice. In fact, it's the hardest one yet. The walls flicker again, forest bleeding into palace, palace into forest. For a moment, both worlds press in, asking the same silent question. Which self will you keep? You reach out. And with that single motion, the dream begins to unravel.
The choice is made before you even realize your fingers have touched anything at all. The room exhales. The flickering walls settle into soft mist, curling around the pedestals, swallowing up the marble floor until it feels like you're standing on a cloud. Whatever you picked, slippers or sneakers, it pulls the world into motion. If you chose the slippers, they clasp your feet like liquid moonlight. Every step you take rings with crystalline chimes. The palace reforms around you, stronger, brighter, more unshakable. Courtiers bow deeper than ever. You're their star, their symbol, their chosen ruler. But the weight presses heavier with each breath, as though the crown's runes are etched into your bones now.
If you chose the sneakers, the laces tighten on their own, snug and familiar. The palace flickers harder, thinning like paper held to flame. Walls dissolve into fields. Chandeliers collapse into stars. You feel lighter, looser, freer, as though the dream can no longer pin you down. The steward, once so composed, blurs into smoke. His voice echoes, stretched and hollow. So it is done. Farewell, princess. The mist thickens, swallowing everything. History aside, every tale ends with the departure. The hero leaves the underworld. The bride leaves her family home. The wanderer leaves the kingdom. Folklorists argue whether these endings were meant as closure or as a reminder that life keeps shifting, that every crown, slipper, or sneaker is temporary. You walk forward, though there's no ground to see. Only the soft scent of roses clings to your hands, faint but stubborn, as if some part of this world insists on leaving its trace. And then, in the distance, you glimpse your own bed, your own sheets, a fan humming softly in the corner, ready to welcome you back. The palace sighs like it's being folded into a storybook. The forest fades like a half-remembered dream. All that remains is the echo of what you were, for a single, dizzying day. You blink, and the mist thins into morning light. Your ceiling greets you, familiar cracks, the faint shadow of the fan spinning lazily above. Sheets twist around your legs, not silk this time, but your own rumpled cotton. The perfume of roses lingers faintly, impossibly, as though a piece of the dream smuggled itself across the border into waking. For a long while, you lie still. Your hand drifts to your hair, half expecting a crown's weight, but there's nothing. Only the ghost of pressure, like the memory of headphones after hours of listening. You chuckle softly. Imagine explaining to someone, "Sorry, I just have phantom crown syndrome." Your feet itch, too. You peek under the blanket. Bare, ordinary, and yet you could swear they remembered the feel of either cold glass or worn canvas. Which choice did you make? The memory slides slippery in your mind, as though the dream itself refuses to tell. History note. Scholars still debate whether dreams of royalty were wish fulfillment, anxiety, or prophecy. In medieval Europe, people sometimes recorded them as omens, proof that heaven itself had sent a message. Folklorists, though, like to argue the opposite. Maybe these dreams were just the brain's way of asking, what would you sacrifice for power or peace? You stretch, yawning so wide your jaw clicks. The room hums softly with the fan's rhythm. Outside, traffic murmurs, or maybe birdsong, depending where you live. Life resumes its steady pace. And yet, there's something different about how you sit up, how you reach for water, how you glance at the window. Like you've carried back a fragment of royal posture or the echo of ballroom grace. And perhaps you have. Because once you've worn a crown, even for a day, even in a dream, you never quite stop feeling the balance of it.
And now, with the story gently folded closed, let's slow everything down. Breathe a little deeper, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Let your shoulders drop, as if the crown has finally been lifted from them, as if no court or kingdom is watching you anymore. The palace is gone now, but maybe its halls still shimmer faintly in your mind.
The chandeliers dim, the roses wilt into silence, and the music of the ball fades to nothing but memory. Imagine walking one last time through the quiet corridors, your footsteps soft and unhurried. Each door you pass clicks shut behind you, gently, as though the story itself is making sure you rest. The forest, too, dissolves. No more whispering crowns, no more mysterious strangers waiting with riddles, just trees fading into shadows and shadows dissolving into night, all of it softening like a page being turned. And here you are, in your own room, safe, warm, and calm. Sheets tucked around you like a cocoon, the air steady, the hum of whatever small comforts surround you, grounding you gently back. Let the last traces of the dream slip from your mind. Keep only what makes you smile, a gown shimmering like starlight, a horse that knew freedom, laughter stolen at a ball. Everything else can rest just as you will. Now close your eyes a little heavier. Drift slower, like sinking into calm water. Allow yourself to float further and further into rest. And with that, good night. Sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams.